For 15 years, nobody asked why James Carter arrived at Lincoln High School at 4:30 a.m. every morning, 2 hours before any teacher or student. Nobody questioned why the 52-year-old janitor walked the hallways with such deliberate attention, checking every door, every window, every sight line, like he was mapping something only he could see. The teachers thought he was just thorough. The students barely noticed him at all. But on March 17th, when an armed intruder forced his way through the north entrance during lunch period with a duffel bag full of weapons and 1,200 students in the building, James Carter stopped being invisible. In the 47 minutes before police breached the building, the man everyone called Mr. James became the only thing standing between a mass casualty event and hundreds of kids who just wanted to go home. What nobody knew was that those careful morning walks weren't just about cleaning. They were reconnaissance routes learned in places where one wrong turn meant ambush. Welcome to Life Stories Archive, where the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary secrets. Lincoln High School in Columbus, Georgia, served 1,200 students from working class and military families near Fort Benning. James Carter had been the head janitor there since 2008, part of the furniture, as invisible to most students as the lockers they passed every day. He worked the early shift, 4:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., which meant he saw the building when it was empty and quiet. He'd start his rounds in the same pattern every day: north entrance, east wing classrooms, cafeteria, gymnasium, south wing, administrative offices, then back to his maintenance closet near the main entrance. Teachers who arrived early knew him as polite and professional. He'd nod good morning, make small talk about the weather, and continue his work with quiet efficiency. Students who stayed after school for activities might see him emptying trash cans or mopping floors, always there but never intrusive. "Morning, Mr. James," was the standard greeting he received, if he received one at all. What people didn't notice was the way his eyes tracked movement patterns, how he'd pause at intersections to assess sight lines, how he'd test doors with a precision that went beyond simply checking if they were locked. These weren't the habits of a janitor. These were the behaviors of someone trained in close protection and threat assessment. On March 17th, James arrived at his usual time. The school was dark except for emergency lighting. He entered through the north entrance, the one with a faulty lock that maintenance had been promising to fix for 6 weeks. He'd reported it 3 times. The work order was still pending. James made his rounds, but this morning, something felt different. Call it instinct, intuition, or just pattern recognition. From years of reading environments for threats, something was off. The side gate that should have been locked was slightly ajar. Fresh tire tracks in the muddy grass near the parking lot's edge. A classroom window on the ground floor that he'd locked yesterday was now unlatched. James didn't panic. He simply adjusted his mental map of the building, noting potential vulnerabilities and access points. Then he went to his maintenance closet and removed an item from the back of his supply shelf. A 2-way radio he'd purchased himself and kept charged just in case. At 11:47 a.m., lunch period was in full swing. The cafeteria held about 400 students. Another 800 were scattered throughout the building, in classrooms, the library, the gymnasium. That's when James heard it over his radio. A security channel he'd programmed in but never needed until now. "We have reports of a suspicious individual entering Lincoln High through the north entrance. All units respond. James was near the administrative office when he saw him. A man in his 20s, dark hoodie, moving with purpose through the north corridor with a large duffel bag. The man didn't know the layout, paused at intersections, uncertain, but he had a semi-automatic rifle slung over his shoulder and a look in his eyes that James had seen before, in combat zones, in places where ideology overtook humanity. James's training kicked in automatically. He was 150 feet from the intruder, who hadn't seen him yet. The nearest students were in the library, 50 feet behind the intruder's position. The cafeteria was 2 corridors away. In that moment, James Carter made a decision based on 15 years of preparation nobody knew he'd been doing. He pressed the fire alarm. The building erupted in controlled chaos. As students began evacuation procedures, they'd practiced dozens of times. But James knew something the intruder didn't. The school's evacuation plan had been designed with his input, routes that would minimize exposure to the North Corridor. He'd been planning for this day since 2008, hoping it would never come. As students evacuated, James moved with tactical precision through maintenance corridors most people didn't know existed. His goal wasn't confrontation, it was containment. Keep the threat isolated, away from students, buying time for police response. The intruder, confused by the fire alarm, had retreated to the north wing, exactly where James had anticipated. Using his knowledge of the building's layout, James began systematically locking doors behind the intruder, creating barriers, limiting access to populated areas. Over his radio, he heard police communications. ETA 7 minutes to scene. Evacuations in progress. 7 minutes was an eternity in an active shooter situation. James knew this from training most people never receive. He'd served 12 years in Army Special Forces, most of it in protective operations and urban combat. He'd retired in 2007 and taken the janitor job specifically because of its proximity to Fort Benning and because he wanted to serve in a different way. But old training doesn't fade. It waits, dormant, until the moment it's desperately needed. James found himself in the North Wing's main corridor, separated from the intruder by 2 sets of locked doors. Through the window, he could see the man had realized he was being contained, was trying doors, growing increasingly agitated. This was the most dangerous moment. A cornered threat often becomes more unpredictable. James's radio crackled. "This is Principal Matthews. James, are you in the building? We need confirmation. All students are evacuated from the North Wing." James keyed his radio. "North Wing is clear. Threat is contained in corridor C3. He doesn't know the building layout." There was a pause. "James, how do you—" "Ma'am, I need you to trust me. Keep police informed. Threat is isolated but armed. I have eyes on the situation." What James didn't say was that he was preparing for the possibility that containment might not be enough. In his maintenance cart, hidden among cleaning supplies, were tools that could be improvised into defensive implements. His years in Special Forces had taught him that anything could be a weapon if you understood leverage, angles, and timing. Police breached the building at exactly 12:34 p.m., 47 minutes after the intruder entered. They found the suspect contained in the North Wing, surrounded by locked doors, with no access to students or staff. They also found James Carter, calmly monitoring the situation from a strategic position, maintaining visual contact while staying out of direct line of fire, his radio providing real-time updates on the suspect's movements. The SWAT commander, a man named Captain Reynolds, approached James after the suspect was in custody. "Sir, who are you, and how did you manage this containment?" James handed over his radio. "James Carter, I'm the janitor. I know this building better than anyone." Reynolds studied him with the trained eye of someone who recognized another professional. "Just a janitor?" James met his gaze steadily. "Now, yes. Before that, 12th Special Forces Group, Protective Operations. Retired 2007. Understanding dawned on Reynolds' face. "You've been running security assessments?" "Every day for 15 years, hoping I'd never need them." The story emerged slowly over the following days. James Carter had retired from Army Special Forces with 2 Bronze Stars and a medical retirement due to combat injuries. He'd taken the janitor position at Lincoln High specifically because he wanted to stay connected to military families and serve in a quieter way. But he'd never stopped being a soldier. Every morning walk was a security patrol. Every door check was a vulnerability assessment. Every friendly nod to students was part of building trust and awareness. He'd identified the faulty lock on the north entrance 6 weeks ago and had been monitoring it daily, knowing it was a weakness. When he couldn't get it officially repaired fast enough, he'd been planning contingencies. Principal Matthews found him in his maintenance closet the day after the incident. "James, why didn't you tell anyone about your background?" "We could have used your expertise officially." James continued organizing his supplies. "Ma'am, I was serving. Just in a different way. The moment people know your security, you stop being invisible. And sometimes the most effective protection comes from people nobody notices." James Carter continued working as Lincoln High's janitor for 2 more years before retiring in 2025. The school tried to promote him to security director, offered him consultant positions, wanted to rename the building after him. He declined everything except one request. They fixed the lock on the north entrance. His morning routine never changed. 4:30 a.m. arrival, methodical building checks, quiet attention to details nobody else saw. The only difference was that students started noticing him more, started saying good morning with a little more respect, started seeing the man who'd been protecting them all along. Some heroes wear uniforms, others wear janitor's coveralls and carry mops instead of rifles. The mission doesn't change: protect those who need protecting. The methods just adapt to circumstance. James Carter never wanted recognition. He wanted students to go home safe. For 15 years, he'd prepared for the worst day, hoping it would never come. When it did, he was ready. Have you ever realized someone in your school or workplace was quietly watching over everyone without recognition? Share their story in the comments. Because the most effective guardians are often the ones we never notice until the moment they're needed most. If this story reminded you to appreciate the people who serve without seeking credit, subscribe to Life Stories Archive. Every quiet protector deserves our recognition.